I'm here for my 50-year high school reunion, and we're here on July 21. And you know, Guy Zee used to work for the station. Okay. He used to work. About a long year. He did a DJ job.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is small.
Obviously, got this.
You might be 70 now.
I'm just
Yeah. You know, I should make that sense. Do you remember the Seinfeld episode of Kramer talked about the centene and the Palm Beach?
Oh,
Yeah.
CJ. Or not CJ. There is. We have a flag on it.
Yeah. You're right.
Please.
Please.
Sure. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please call a roll. Mr. Violi here. Mr. Kelly here. Mrs. Baba?
Here.
Mr. Grimm here. Mr. Gibson. We stand for the pledge. Mr. Kelly?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we need, we need a motion to elect Kevin Grimm treasurer pro tem for this meeting. We have a first and a second. Please call the roll. Mrs. Baba?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes. Mr. Violi? Yes.
Congratulations.
Carried. Thank you very much.
Great job.
Okay.
What's up with CJ?
Please just do it.
Okay.
Every meeting.
Public comments. I see we only have one signed up for public comments. So before we go ahead and introduce you, Alex, if you want to go ahead and announce.
Yep. Welcome everyone to tonight's live broadcast of the Streetsboro Board of Education meeting. I'm Alex Antonsik. Tonight's meeting is actually being held in the new Streetsboro Middle School, which looks very nice for my first time seeing it. And back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Alex. Moving on to the public comments. Mr. Sumsky, if you'd like to take the podium. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Ed Sumsky. My address is 5353 Osborne Road in San Bernardino, California, and been there 49 years. I'm here for my 50-year high school reunion coming up on July 21, so it's going to be good to see all those folks again. Our annual meeting was held at the new high school on the last day of June 30, in the common area where the students have lunch. We have a new board of director member. I'll review the old ones. Let's see, Ted Hurd is the president. This is his second year. He's an alumni class of 1970. Michelle Haru moved from the vice president's position to the treasurer. It's my class of 66. He is succeeding Debbie Wenzel, who's moving to Florida. She was my senior prom date. Judy Puster is still acting as our secretary, and she graduated in 76. And our new vice president is Bill Colazar, who graduated in 88. He serves as our vice president. We awarded 4 scholarships this year. Actually, all the ones that we received. We only received 4 applicants. We funded them all. Maddie Hall, Benjamin Schaefer, Miranda Maroon, and Will Butler. And we want those kids to be successful. You know, we want them to get a good education. We want them to get good jobs. We want them to earn a lot of money. We want them to fund Social Security. All right, our website, for the past academic year, we've had over 114,000 page hits during this academic year. Alumni, teachers, and citizens of Streetsboro can now join online by going to our website, www.streetsboroalumni.com, and click on the tab that says Join Now Online. And we have approximately 653 lifetime members and associate members. And the class of 1968 is celebrating their 50-year class reunion, July 21st at the new KSU Hotel and Conference Center. Thank you very much for your time. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
As always, it's great to see you in town, so thank you.
We were just talking about what a great year 1968 was.
Yeah, yes, you were born that year.
How'd you know that?
I have a trap like a steel mine.
That scares me.
I'm taking my meds, no problem.
Okay, moving on to approval of minutes, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the minutes from 6/14/18 and 6/28/18 as submitted.
I'll move.
I'll second.
First and second. Any comments? Please call a roll.
Mrs. Ballard?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes. Mr. Violi?
Yes, motion carried. Moving on to reports. Superintendent's report.
Aside from a couple comments I typed down there for all of you to read, I do not have a report.
What? Are you okay, Mr. Kelly?
Wow.
Need interventions?
I'm okay.
Okay, moving on to treasurer's report. Do we have a treasurer's report? Do you want to defer to?
I will defer that since I'm just pro tem to
Well,
Mr. Scarsky.
Mike told me one prerequisite of the job is that I have to have a longer report than him, so he stops getting made fun of.
Wow.
So that was my elevator speech. There is no treasurer. It was longer than yours, Mike.
Thank you,
Good job.
Mr.
Especially
Scarsky. And moving on to board reports. Mrs. Babel.
Yes, we have a video to show from Mrs. Baba.
So I was at a meeting in Columbus a month or two ago, and this video was shown related to student achievement, and I just thought it was interesting. I think all school boards in Ohio should look at it, but I'm only a member of one, so I brought it here. And thank you, Mr. Dava and Mr. Andres for facilitating this.
Let's see here.
This is all new equipment, so.
Should work.
Hey, line up! Line up! Everybody line up! We're about to race! Everybody line up! Shoulder to shoulder! Take off your backpack! Basketball, line up! We're about to race! Hey, we are racing for a $100 bill. The winner of this race will take this. The $100 bill. Before I say go, I'm going to make a couple statements. If those statements apply to you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. If those statements don't apply to you, I want you to stay right where you're at. Take 2 steps forward if both of your parents are still married. Take 2 steps forward if you grew up with a father figure in the home. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a private education. Take 2 steps forward if you had access to a free tutor growing up. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to worry about your cell phone being shut off. Take 2 steps forward if you never had to help mom or dad with the bills. Take 2 steps forward if it wasn't because of your athletic ability, you don't have to pay for college. Take 2 steps forward if you never wondered where your next meal was going to come from. I want you guys up here in the front just to turn and look. Every statement I've made has nothing to do with anything any of you have done. Has nothing to do with decisions you've made. Everything I've said has nothing to do with what you've done. We all know these people up here have a better opportunity to win this $100. Does that mean these people back here can't race? No. We would be foolish to not realize we've been given more opportunity. We don't want to recognize that we've been given a head start. But the reality is we have. Now, there's no excuse. They still got to run that race. You still got to run your race. But whoever wins this $100, I think it'd be extremely foolish of you not to utilize that and learn more about somebody else's story. Because the reality is, if this was a fair race and everybody was betting on that line, I guarantee you some of these black dudes would smoke all of you. And it's only because you have this big of a head start that you're possibly going to win this race called life. That is a picture of life, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing you've done has put you in the league that you're in right now. When I say go, on your mark, get set, go! If you didn't learn anything from this activity, you're a fool.
So I was at a meeting with other school board members when this was shown, and it was just to remind us that we have to educate all students and prepare all of them for life. But this was a meeting where there was a lot of discussion, and some of the folks pointed out that talking about some implicit bias. Not all of the kids on the back line were young black men. There were some young white men on that back line too. And also there were a fair amount of females. And also the guy who was offering the $100 bill made the comment that, you know, some of those black guys could smoke you, but he didn't comment about the young females that might have had the opportunities. So we had a long discussion about our perceptions of individuals, and just as public educators that we need to be responsible to everyone that we educate and know that everybody comes with a different life history, and just be aware of our implicit biases that we bring with us, and just recognize that everybody has their story. So I just wanted to share that.
Denise, would you be, and I think maybe you can answer this now, would you consider facilitating this video and what you just said at our opening day staff meeting?
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
I think it would be very powerful. I thought it was a very moving video. And I like all the different points you made about it too, not only just our race, but we were looking at gender as well.
Went to a training, OSBA had a training at the ESC, Cuyahoga County ESC. And there were two ladies there, and their names are just kind of slipping my mind, but they did an exercise which was very similar to what you experienced in the video, but the training just all about diversity and all about, you know, the differences that people have in growing up. And the exercise was almost identical to that, and it might not even be a bad idea to have them do maybe some type of a program for the schools too, or for the community as well. I'll see if I can get the information from my notes. It was a really good training meeting that I went to. Thank you so much.
Yep, that's it for my report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gibson?
No report this time.
Thank you. Mr. Grimm?
The only thing I have, just wanted to make mention, it's not too much of a problem now because school's out, but Route 303 is completely closed, starting at the railroad tracks to Jefferson Street because of culvert replacement. they'll have that done probably in 4 weeks, way before school opens. And hopefully by then the bowl will be finished. If you've not been down there recently, it used to be a dip and now it's almost a hump. So they're putting a lot of stuff in that bowl.
So is it the bypass, the temporary bypass?
The bypass is still open. You can get from the center of town to Jefferson Street on 303, but you can't get from Jefferson Street to Hudson on 303. So that section is.
From the railroad tracks? You can't get past the railroad tracks,
Right past the railroad tracks, just east of the tracks is where they have it blocked off and they're digging the road.
What did they put? How did they do that? I mean, did they bore into the ground? It looked like they had like pipes that went in.
Yeah,
like
what they're
every
doing
couple
farther
of
down at where that dip is, they've done several layers of stuff. I don't know what that stuff is, but they have some kind of wicking material to bring the moisture up and away. And I don't know what those pipes are, but the roadway's pretty much up to the level of those pipes. It's pretty high. They bring a lot of dirt right down the street.
It's like 17, 20 feet higher than
Yeah,
what it was.
yeah, it's crazy. But then hopefully that'll all be done before school starts and easier on our buses. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Mr. Kelly?
Nothing today.
And I do have notes from the Maplewood meeting last month. I did not forward them to you, but I will forward them to you. Nothing exciting. It's summertime, so. Okay. Moving on to the consent agenda. It is recommended the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items B through Q.
I'll move. I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any comments?
Yes, I would, if you don't mind, Mr. President. I'd like to talk about the student handbook briefly. I know that the consent agenda is meant to move things along, so we don't have to have discussion, but I did want to make the point that our administrators, along with Ariane and Joe, several folks, they probably spent, I don't know, between 8 and 10 hours. If you remember, this dates back clear to Cindy Hanish. There's always been a desire to have one handbook for the entire district. And the administrators actually approached me about this year because it's a huge task to create a handbook. And they worked on this a lot. And a lot of time went into this. And what they did was they created one handbook because many of the points in the handbook were relevant to all the buildings, but then there are some building specific things. So they basically looked at all the handbooks and rewrote all the handbooks into one handbook, citing relevant board policy, because we changed our board policy last year, and updated it, House Bill 310 with the truancy updates and things like that. So what you see in the board docs is that updated handbook. Sue worked all day today to reformat that. She and Andreas worked together on that. So it's ready to go, but what I would like you guys to do is go ahead and vote on it. But Denise, like, for example, called me today. You can look at this thing 100 times. And I told Denise, it's almost like you start to get blinders. I'm sure the students can appreciate this. You read the same thing over and over again, you start to miss stuff. So if you guys could take some time, assuming that you vote yes on it, if you can take some time over the next few weeks, I know it's a lot, read a section a night or read, I don't know, however you want to do it. And if you see some typos, some things that maybe could be more clear, send those to me and we can do that. The essence of the document is done. And I'm very happy with it. But like I said, I've read it too many times now. So if you see some typos or even a run-on sentence, I don't know, just let me know or let Sue know. We can modify that. But our intentions are to get this posted in the 1st of August, so that on final form, so that our parents can see it. But I think you'll be pretty happy with it. Denise made some great points about a couple of some wordsmithing. She didn't have a chance to get all the way through it. I don't think it's because it's an expansive document. But if you guys take some time to do that, I would appreciate any feedback you could give. As far as changes, the changes reflect board policy changes and law changes. So it's basically taking those 4 handbooks and combining them into one to make it more efficient. I apologize for doing that under consent, but I didn't really think it needed to be under superintendents.
Thank everybody for all the work on it. We appreciate it.
The only thing I would add about that is there are a lot of things taking place behind the scenes at Streetsboro. We were improving, I think, every year that I've been on the board, but now with our face to the public is they're seeing a lot of the changes that have been going on for years behind the scene. We've got a fabulous looking website. It looks wonderful on mobile app, on the mobile. We've got the one, handbook now, the final forms that was introduced last year. I mean, it may seem like all this stuff just all of a sudden happened, but a lot of these things, there have been changes behind the scenes going on for years, and now Mr. Dawa kind of got his hands of bringing it all together, and I think the public can, they can really see it, so.
You remember when Dr. Calfee shook his head at me when I made the statement as you guys tapped me as the new superintendent? I said one of the first things I wanted to do was create online registration, and he started smirking and shaking his head. We finally had online registration last year. It took a lot to get to that point. Foolish me 5.5 years ago, I said, oh yeah, we're gonna do that right away. But thanks to these, because that wasn't a project that we could do right away. It took a tremendous amount of time and your support for allowing us to move in that direction.
Excellent. I just mentioned donations. It looks like some of the scholarship funds are getting rejuvenated. A lot of donations to the Educational Foundation for those scholarship funds, so thank you.
And I just call your attention to item M is that 26.83 an hour. It just says 26.83 effective.
Yes, 26.83 per hour. And the reason is the board, I had put as a recommendation we give Mr. Alshouse a raise beyond his step increase because he has increased duties. We've kind of downsized the department, so he has increased duties. So it's now off the salary schedule. So that's why we want to make that reflective of his steps, if that makes sense. Thanks, Steve.
If there are no further comments, please call roll.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes. Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mrs. Baba?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes, motion carries. Moving on to superintendent's recommendations.
Thank you. Item A, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the resolution requesting the Board of Elections to place a levy on the ballot of an additional 7.5 mil tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation for current operating expenses for a term of 5 years.
I'll move.
I'll second. We have a first and a second.
So we passed our resolution of intent at our last board meeting. This is the next step to get our levy on the ballot for November. So this is our second, this is a requirement by the Ohio Revised Code.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Baba?
Yes.
Mr. Violi?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes.
Thank you. Item D, it is recommended the Board of Education approve the new rate of pay of $14.50 per hour for sub-bus drivers.
I'll move.
I'll second.
First and second, comments?
Just that when we looked at, we were having a very difficult time getting sub-bus drivers. And when Brandy came on, Mrs. Hollis came on, she started doing a deep dive into trying to figure out why. And we discovered that we were actually the lowest paying sub rate in this entire region. This does not put us at the top at all, but it makes us competitive with Kent, Ravenna, Crestwood, puts us even with those folks. And she believes that $14.50, she'll be able to pull, she already has talked to a few drivers, now will pull some of our drivers away from the areas to come to Streetsboro because we have a newer fleet.
So this puts us at average then?
Yeah, and I attached a spreadsheet down there if you look at it, but yes, Mr. Gibson, it puts us, I would actually say at the low average.
Yeah.
So,
It comes up in the spreadsheet.
oh, does it?
No, it's, you just have to
Scroll
move
up.
it, yes, no, scroll to the left a little bit and you'll see. Actually, I'm counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 districts that are still ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think this is a starting point. We can see if this works for us. But I would anticipate next summer possibly coming to you and saying maybe even do another increase. But I didn't want to overdo it. You know, I didn't want to go too high. I want to see, you know, I wanted to see if this would attract more drivers. She's had verbal conversations with some subs that don't want to be full-time drivers. They like the sub job. There are some benefits to a sub job because you take field trips where your regular drivers can't take a lot of the field trips because it impedes on their hours. So a lot of subs said, you know, yeah, we'll come to Streetsboro. They like our climate, our bus fleet, our kids, and I'm not saying anything about other districts, but she has verbal commitments from several. But I may come back to you and say, why don't we bump it up some more? But I wanted to start at $14.50.
How many do we have? You know,
Well, yeah, I do. We only had consistently about 6, and out of those 6, 3 were intermittent.
Okay.
So what that did is we had a tough year with attendance due to illness. So very frequently this year, I think you guys probably have already heard this, and I'm sure you had angry residents calling you But we actually had to combine a lot of bus runs this year. And when Brandy came on board, Brandy drove almost every day. Josh, our mechanic, drove almost every day. And, you know, and we really don't want those two out on the roads driving because they have very specific duties. And this is her attempt, along with a couple of the other things she's doing, to try and get more folks to come and drive for us.
Yeah, I was surprised that I thought it'd be higher, to be honest with you. I would have no problem with you increasing that. I know it sounds weird right now, but.
No, I'd agree. I mean, I'd say there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, we can amend this if the board would like, if the board would like to pass this, or we can continue to talk about it and amend it right now. Mr. President, I will invite you to entertain that discussion with everyone. What do you guys think?
Do you have a number on what we're spending per year on sub drivers?
I don't know.
Like, so we can see where
It's
we
pretty
can be
high.
reflecting.
Well, I can tell you that can't give you a hard number on that, but I can tell you it's pretty high because we had a really high rate of absenteeism this year. And so we spent more this year, I think, I won't put a year number to it, but I'll say many years on sub drivers. So yes, Sandy, we did have a lot. So we expended more this year. So it's our hope that we can get our folks better. But in the interim, this will help them fill our routes. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess, is where you're going with this, but possibly. We are spending more.
Just, I mean, if we knew on average what we're spending, I know we can see, you know.
I think that's
what
probably
raise
like you're
do
saying, it's
that.
going to fluctuate from year to year based on the circumstances of that year.
I would, just my opinion, I would stay with the number that you have.
Okay.
Look at maybe the first month of school to see if there's any issues. And if we have to amend and adjust it, we can do it then.
Yeah, so it's a 1450. I'll take the guidance from the board. It sounds like you guys are okay with the 1450. If we want to maybe revisit this in October, September, because really our biggest absentee rates are that November, December range when the flu hits. And then we never recovered from that, certified and classified, not just bus drivers. We're talking our entire staff was just decimated this year with illness. It was a tough year. It was a really tough year.
I think it puts us right in line with where Kent is, so.
I would agree, it does. I guess if you really want to attract some of the better bus drivers in the area, you might as well go above. I mean, what's 50 cents or 75 cents? I mean, how many hours really couldn't have flat down? It's going to be that much really in the grand scheme of things. So if you want to attract some of the better bus drivers in the area, which, no offense to the bus department, but I think the transportation department, we need them. Why not? And we don't have to do it now. I agree, Brian, we can wait, but why not go to like 1510 or something right past Crestwood? So that's just my theory on that. I'm not a
Well, I can tell you that Field,
major, but
I can tell you that Field and Crestwood and Garfield for sure. I can tell you with confidence that the reason they're up where they were is because they had the same problems we were having.
They're
And they were trying
more rural too.
They're more rural, and so sometimes those are more difficult routes as well. Which is another reason folks want to come to Streetsboro, because our routes are not difficult. They're all city driving. Basically, 90% of them are city driving, and the roads that aren't city driving, for the most part, are pretty good roads. There's some roads that are out off the diagonal that get a little rough sometimes, but for the most part, these are pretty easy. And some of our allotments, they're tough to get in and out of, but we have a new fleet, and we have a city to drive in with pretty decent roads. So, yeah, so am I hearing then that let's maybe keep a close eye on this, and if we need another change, I can bring it to you guys again in the fall?
yeah.
Okay, good. So we'll stick with the I think it's a great idea. I just didn't want to go too high, and I appreciate this discussion because I think this is good. And you guys are the voice of the public on this, and we do need to get more drivers here, period.
Yeah, we do.
So we have a motion on the table. We're going to vote on that motion.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we have first and second, and I hear no further discussion. Please call the roll.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mrs. Baba.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Grimm. Yes. Mr. Violi.
Yes, motion carried.
Thank you. Item C, it is recommended the Board of Education approve a resolution declaring an urgent necessity exists to remove and replace the Depper Intermediate School chiller in the amount not to exceed $200,000.
I'll move. I'll second. First and second. Would you like to comment?
Yes, if we, you can do an urgent necessity resolution when the conditions of in this case of the building deem it that we need to have this work done outside of the competitive bidding process. Competitive bidding process takes an extended period of time, which would then interfere with students coming back. If you were to go over it right now to Duffer and walk, that building was not meant to have windows open because it was a newer building, just like this building. You have windows, but they're meant to be closed and they create a building envelope. You open the window, you open the door, you throw off the entire building envelope. So we were able to declare urgent necessity because that chiller is no longer functioning. We thought we could get it through until October. The Grim Reaper appeared and that chiller is dead. That's why we want to do this urgent necessity. We did get 3 quotes and we are going with the lowest bidder. They're all 3 were vetted by Hammond. We asked Hammond and FMD to give us their top people. We called and asked for quotes from those top people. Johnson Controls came in the lowest bid. Their bid included a high efficiency chiller. There's only one left in the nation. They're holding it for us right now. And give you an idea of what this is going to do. It's actually going to be able to reduce the space in that area because they're going to eliminate the evaporator or become a newer equipment has that evaporator internally. They're thinking just the unit alone going from what we had to what we have will represent an annual savings just on the machine itself of $9,700. But our representative, who is a Streetsboro resident, the representative for Johnson's Controls believes that once we apply for our energy rebates through First Energy, that annual savings can be an additional $21,000 a year. So this is going to be a much more high efficient model than what is currently over at Duffer and not working. To also be clear too, this is a 90-day, when you get chillers and this type of equipment, it's a 90 days parts and labor warranty. So I'm having him prepare some extended warranty options that we could act on if we want at the August board meeting if we want to spend the money on them. But for now, we need to get the work going. We've already started some of the preliminary behind the scenes shuffling, if you will. I pasted it down in the administrative contents, just some of the savings and the differences in the machines. It's pretty cool. I appreciate being able to move forward on this so our kids and staff can return to a cool building. It's about 90 degrees in that building now, maybe more warmer. We had to purchase different wax for the floors, the treat and wax floors because it's so hot, because the wax we were using was for a climate cool building. So we actually had to go out and purchase different wax to be able to clean the building. That's all I have to answer questions.
I did have a question, and I forgot what it was.
About the warranty?
It wasn't about the warranty.
Oh.
When's the work going to be done on that?
I would say you're going to see a crane out there. My guess would be within the next 4 or 5 weeks, because we'll start removing the old one. It's my understanding they're thinking they can have this thing installed by the middle of August. So our teachers are going to come back to a warm building initially if they come back early, but before students walk through the door that 3rd week in August, we should have that chiller in.
The last question I have is that the funds are going to be paid for through not general fund dollars.
Not general fund dollars, these are PI dollars. CJ, Matt, and I still are going back and forth on the best fund to take that from, because we have 2 funds. We have the 0.5 mil levy that was passed with the bond issue that we can take that from because this is part of the building project, or we can take that from our other PI fund that was renewed last November. Either way, we have money in both to do both and to continue forward with our other projects that we've talked about.
But it won't come out of general fund.
It will not come out of general fund, absolutely not. And it will not come out of proceeds from cell tower or gaming rights for the stadium. We're not touching any of that per your request at our last board meeting. So this will come out of PI dollars that the community voted for this specific purpose, not operating dollars.
Any idea on the life expectancy for this?
I'm going to give you a rough figure. If it's maintained properly, easily 30 years. Easily 30 years. There is no reason that chiller should be gone. And the reason it's gone is because a portion of it went down about 7 years ago. And rather than fixing that portion, we did some creative mechanical wiring and things so that the chiller wasn't giving the other part of the chiller a break. We were running all the time. Those chillers are designed to run in stages. So one stage runs, the other stage rests, and it flips. So we ran one stage all the time. And that's what wore out that chiller.
So you're running single phase and then
correct.
The other side never kicked in.
No, and it's because the other side was broken and we didn't fix it. And when when I became superintendent and Randy became maintenance director, all right at the same time, that was one of the things he started looking at all the facilities, and that was one of the first recommendations he made. Is like, we need to get that chiller fixed. And so we had it fixed. And I remember, I want to say it was in the $13,000 to $15,000 range. We fixed the chiller, but it wore down the entire unit. And so now here we are 6 years later, 6 years later, and the chiller's gone. That chiller should have outlived all of us. Our presidents, well, I don't know how long you guys want to be on the board, but it should have outlived a lot of us as far as its life expectancy.
Forever, Mike.
Yeah. Outlived my life expectancy.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mr. Beal.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mrs. Baba.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes.
Motion carried.
My final recommendation is recommended the Board of Education approve the surround care fees for 2018-19 school year.
I'll move.
I'll second.
First and second, comments?
Yeah, my only comments would be that we're raising our rates. We're trying to cover, we've not had any rate increases in a while. As a result, our surround care has run into the red. That program needs to be a self-sufficient program. In other words, it has to cover our personnel costs. It needs to cover costs of using the building, as well as games, equipment, supplies, and food. So these rate increases are very low, but they represent about a 15% increase, which should cover and get us into the black and also help recover some of those funds that we were in the red this last year.
If I can add to that, I know some folks that do run surround care in other districts. This is a very good rate.
This is still one of the best rates in town.
Yes.
There are some daycare centers that might compete with this a little bit, but it doesn't offer the same perks that we have. We're right there in the building. We have,
This is a really good, it's a very good deal.
So this is designed to help us recover some of those funds that we were in the deficit for this year. And then CJ and I will become we'll become in charge of surround care from an administrative standpoint. And we've already met with the director who was mortified that she was in the red, and we're all working together to create some policies and procedures to address that. And CJ and I will oversee that, his department, and I will oversee that as far as we'll monitor the costs and we'll make increases or changes or policy changes as need be. I can give you more if you want, but I think for now these costs reflect a kind of recovery of funds and keep us in the black next year.
Okay, please call the roll.
Mrs. Baba.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes. Mr. Violi.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Motion carried.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Galloway. Moving on to treasurer's recommendations. Who should we go with?
I would look at CJ because I really don't have anything.
Okay, any new business? Any old business? Moving on to board president's recommendations. Item A is recommend the Board of Education approve policy 9.41 on parent and family engagement as shown in the attachment.
I'll move.
I'll second.
We have a first and a second. Any comments? Please call the roll.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mrs. Baba.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes. Mr. Violi.
Yes, motion carried. Moving on to item B. It's recommended the Board of Education enter into executive session to have a conference with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject of pending or imminent court action, and to consider details relative to security arrangements and emergency response protocol for a public body or a public office with possible action to follow.
I'll move.
I'll second.
First and second, please call the roll.
Mr. Kelly. Yes. Mrs. Baba.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Mr. Grimm, yes. Mr. Violi.
Yes, motion carried. We're in executive session at 6:30.